how do we build community where we're at? Because I've heard a lot of people say, I felt the most connected in high school or college, and I've never found that since.
You know why? There's a reason 40-year-old guys still get together and talk about the big game. They still talk about that because that was the last time they were a part of something bigger than themselves. Literally, our bodies are so desperate to belong. The greatest hedge is not a year's worth of food, and the greatest hedge isn't a whole bunch of weapons. The greatest hedge against when it all goes down is to have a great relationship with your neighbors. And we've just taken that from our society, just plucked it out, and we made everything a transaction, and we are dying of loneliness, and it's heartbreaking.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lila Rose podcast. Today we're talking with Dr. John Delony, best-selling author and Ramsey personality. You've probably seen his videos on YouTube where he is asked the toughest questions about relationships, family life, work, all kinds of things, parenting, and he gives some really great practical advice. We're going to deep dive communities, how to find meaning, and relationships, dating, how to find a spouse, how to divorce-proof your marriage, and much more. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Dr. Delony, thanks for joining the show.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you in the flesh here. That's great.
It's good to talk to you in person.
So Delony like baloney, but you say call me John.
Yes.
You're a doctor though. What kind of doctor are you? Let's start there.
I have one PhD in education. I have another one in counseling.
Okay. And so I've watched you grow over the last, I think, couple of years, but it's been more than that. And you've really taken over YouTube, I feel like, with advice. In a good way.
It's been a weird couple of years, that's for sure. I'm like an introverted nerd. And so, yeah, it's been a very weird little world.
Well, a lot of, it's always popping up like, what do you do if this crazy thing happens? Or how do I parent my kids? I mean, all of this stuff. There's tons of people asking you tons of questions, and you do a great job just dishing it.
I appreciate that.
Really good, down to earth, practical stuff.
That's what I think has been the greatest. I've got an awesome crew that runs with me, but there's a lot of people talking about neurochemicals. That's awesome.
Neurochemicals.
All the complexities of everything, and that's fine, but it doesn't help like that single mom with 2 kids. You're just trying to have how do I find peace in my house? Or the truck driver just wants to be a better dad. Like there's nobody talking to those folks. And so that's been the adventure the last 3 or 4 years is like, let's make things as simple as possible and give somebody something you can go do in your house. Right, to make your life a little bit better.
That's good. And I think it also is the part of the value is, yes, people coming to you with their problems. Other people have similar problems. Listen to the episode. But also you're just listening to the content and you know someone who was in that person's shoes, who's calling into your show. Well, your child, you have concerns about your child. And so maybe it's not directly applicable to your own life, but it's your friend, you're advising.
Right,
so it just provides this more context for how to think about these problems that so many people are struggling with.
Yeah, the thing that, like the first 6 months, like arrogantly, I thought, oh, people are buying it. Like the way the show took off, I was like, because I'm so smart, right? Because I'm so smart.
You're a PhD. You're a doctor.
Yeah. That wasn't why people were tuning in. They were tuning in because they've never seen their friend cheated on their husband. And they've never seen anybody have that interaction with compassion. They don't know what that looks like. Or they've never heard somebody say, hey, somebody hurt my kid. And how do you do that, right? And so they're actually, I think the show's done well because people watch the interaction and it gives them a toolkit for how do I tell my husband I'm not doing right, I'm not doing okay, or how do I tell my wife that I'm struggling with attraction? Like, what do you do? And it's usually not the word so much as how you just sit with somebody and make someone go, I'm safe here.
So that's really interesting what you're saying, because you're saying it's not just the actual advice you're giving, like textbook.
It's almost never the advice, yeah.
It's the fact that you're willing to listen and not just jump down their throat in terms of judgment, but you still make judgments. This is right, this is wrong, but it's how you engage them to help them come to the right conclusion. Yeah,
and there's two, and the cool part about my academic journey was going back to school after I had a bunch of wisdom. A lot of students would get their bachelor's and get their master's, get their PhD, and they've sat in a lot of classes. But man, until you've held a mom whose kids passed away, or until you've sat in this room or that room or that room, you don't have that wisdom, right? And there's just a different weight to those rooms. And so going back to school after all those experiences was helpful. And there's been 2 paths that is happening in the mental health profession, which I'm happy about. There's a lot I'm not happy about, but the 2 I am happy is, one is I had one professor, and I'll never forget, she said this. She said, stop asking people why they're drinking. That's not a helpful question. Start asking them what in the world is happening in your life that this is the best way your body's figured out how to get through a day. And that's such a more compassionate question, and it helps you both get to an answer. And then the other side is, you know, for 150 years, they've told therapists to be neutral. And now people are starting to realize, like, that's cruel sometimes. Sometimes you gotta look at somebody and say, stop. You have to stop doing X, Y, or Z, right? You're hurting people, or you gotta quit, you gotta change. And so it's both and, which is pretty cool. I can sit compassionately and be curious and say, you gotta stop cheating, or you gotta stop stealing, or you gotta stop drinking, or your life's not gonna get any better. And I like that.
What I've seen you do is you get really curious about the why, like you just said, behind the behavior and the act and the choices, because that's the only way to redirect in the right direction. Because whatever desire is that they have that they're squelching, right, or the need that they have that's not met, or the trauma they have they're not dealing with, that's ultimately responsible. I mean, you can't say they're totally powerless to those things, right? I don't want to say it's fully responsible, but that's a big factor,
right?
In bad behavior in general,
our culture,
or bad choices.
You go to jail for these 2 or 3 numbing mechanisms. You get outcasted for these 2 or 3 numbing mechanisms. But if your addiction happens to be work, we just give you $1 million. Or if your addiction happens to be X, Y, and Z, we reward you for it. And so it's getting beneath that and saying, oh, you're struggling just as much as this person is, even though we're all patting you on the back and we're lecturing you. It's all the same pathology. Everybody's hurting, right? And everybody's trying to duct tape over that. And so if we can get to the hurt part, then we can get to the healing.
Good Ranchers is American meat delivered. This is amazing poultry, beef, pork, all of the things, 100% sourced from the United States. Did you know when you go to the grocery store, up to 90% of the meat, even if it says product of the USA, is not from the USA? With American meat, you know you're supporting American ranchers. You're also getting amazing cuts of steak and chicken. And there's an amazing promotion happening right now for the month of June, where if you go to goodranchers.com, use the code Lila, in any subscription box, you will get a lifetime supply of free bacon. What that means is if you become a subscriber and get your monthly box of meat and chicken, of whatever you like, you will also get free bacon for as long as you are a monthly subscriber. And their bacon is delicious. So go check it out today, goodranchers.com, and use the code Lila at checkout for free bacon for life. So good. What do you think are the biggest kind of societally accepted, you know, the society is actually accepting or even encouraging what is ultimately, you mentioned workaholism, what is ultimately often because someone's really unhealthy? What would be some of those things today that you've seen? Or it's like you get patted on the back for being unhealthy.
Yeah, I think you get patted on the back for being the hustle culture, right? Yeah. Work. And I think you get patted on the back for accomplishment culture. How many certificates or awards or and academicians are the worst, right? How many certificates can you have on your wall? Also, there's the new currency that's just popped up is feelings, or they call them the victim Olympics, right? Like how many hurts do you have, and how many labels do you have, and how
much trauma have you been through?
Right. And I'm going to lead trauma first because that, I'm told, is the most important part of my life. That's the most important part of my story. So I'm going to lead with my diagnosis. I'm going to lead with some of these things that are absolutely a part of your story, but that's not all of who you are, right? And so it's everything is leaning, or as one guy says, we're entering every room but first, right? We're entering a room with all the things that are wrong with us, as that's our new social currency, how tired we are. Like if I say, hey, how was your weekend? You're like, it was great with my kids. Everything was wonderful. I'll be like, oh, she's kind of weird. But if I say, how's it going? You're like, well,
so stressed.
I'm so exhausted. I got my 3rd kid. And that's just the social
it's like
currency.
You complain about, it's especially the kid stuff. Cause I just had a baby. I shared this earlier. We've got a 6-week-old at home and, or here, she's not far from here, but it's crazy that so many people have such a negative, they expect me to be negative about being a mom. Yeah. Like, oh, you have 3, you're done, right? Like, I've heard that multiple times walking around the supermarket with my kid. Like, what a nice family. Oh, 3 is a lot. You've got a lot. You're done, right? Like, you've got your girl, you know, like, because we have 2 boys. And like, how did we get, like, it's like almost like it is the Olympics for feeling bad about ourselves as mothers, I guess. Like, I should feel so bad about myself that I'm a mother, or
I think I'm
struggling so much.
We're so nervous to offend each other.
That's
and
true,
if I say like, wow, number 3, congratulations, and you happen to have some negativity around it. Well, I'm really struggling, or my husband's abusive, or fill in the blank. It's somehow my fault for seeing joy and beauty in your life, right? And pointing out the sunshine. And so as a culture, we just point out the darkness. That's all we do is focus on how bad everything is. And as one researcher says, what you go looking for in the world, that's what you're going to find. And so that's the glasses we all wear. What's the worst thing that could be happening right now? Oh, you have a new baby. You must be tired. It must be awful. Yes, I'm exhausted.
Getting any sleep?
No, I have a 6 month. Like it's.
But it's awesome.
It's both and, right?
Yeah, I'm awake multiple times a night, but I am so grateful.
Right, you have joy.
People
Are you happy?
go their whole lives longing for a child. I have 3 of them.
Right.
You know, it's all about, like you said, the perspective. I mean, the way we see our own lives.
And we conflate joy and happiness, right? Like. No, the 6th week, the 4th time awake, getting pooed on, nobody's happy. But there's a, no, this is right. There's a joy there, right? And what a blessing that we could do 3. We got to have 3, right? Oh, and we may have 4, we may have 5.
I hope so.
What a blessing, what a blessing, right?
Right.
And being able to sit in all of it. And we don't like to do that.
It's interesting what you're saying, because it makes me think about the messiness, of course, like you mentioned, being up at night, changing diapers with kids, the messiness of just life when you're open to life,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Like the chaos of life when you're open to new opportunities, new experiences, new human beings
right.
that are not predictable, that have their own schedule, their own needs. They're not always on your time. Like children are
They never are, right?
They never are, right?
Yeah.
But what is life about at the end of the day? It's about love, and love has risks. You take a risk with love.
Every time, yeah. And you just got a new marriage.
Yeah.
You've never been married with 3 kids.
5 years in. Yeah,
right?
that's true. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
What I'm saying? But like,
I like that, yeah.
You've never been married with 3
Yeah,
kids, and
true.
so now you'll get to reinvent it. And when my wife was pregnant with our first, but I kept waiting to get my wife back until I realized, that part of our life where we can just do whatever we want, whenever we want, it's over. And now we get to build something amazing and new. And I think the more we lean into this, the more opportunities we have to have an awesome whatever comes next. The more I just remember when, man, I'm just choosing to be miserable in the present. And that's just a weird way to live, you know?
Yeah, I feel like so many people are shocked when we even have 3 kids, even though that's only, I mean, I'm one of 8 kids. So I'm like, we're in like the minor leagues right now. We are just getting started. My husband's one of 8 kids. And even that mentality about kids, like how could you do more than 1 or 2 or even 3 is like maxing it out. And I think that is connected to what you're saying earlier about just our societal focus on achievement or on just kind of going the own route, whatever feels good for us and easy for us. I mean, how do you encourage someone to want that life that is more risky, chaotic in terms of like inviting in other human beings, whether it's children or just being open to love, being open to living in community with each other? It gets messy. You know, marriage is like this ultimate community. It gets messy. It's complicated. And it's just easier for some people to just kind of go it alone or keep it neat and tidy.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think neat and tidy is an illusion, because you can have it as neat and tidy as you want, but one day you're going to get the call that mom's got cancer. That call's coming, right? Or one day you're getting the call that dad just had an accident. That call's going to come. And so the question is, what is the world going to look like when those calls come? There will be the day your boss calls you in and says, I'm sorry, but we're cutting your division. That call will come in your lifetime. I've got some very clear pictures of being a new professional, and back when the State of the Union meant something, and every channel, because there was no Netflix or anything, every channel just had the president like coming to say, I've got to say something to the American people. And I remember Bush coming and saying, we're about to have a recession, it's about to be bad. I remember not fully understanding what a mortgage-backed security was, but I remember my body being like, oh, this is not good, right? I remember some of the war declarations. I remember some of those moments throughout my childhood. And so I think we create these illusions that we can not love and not risk and not take on that scary stuff, or have to deal with our childhoods that maybe weren't so pleasant, and we're worried about reproducing those things in the future. And we just think we can avoid it all. And the question I always want to ask is, no, those calls are coming. What's my life going to look like when the next big thing hits? Do I want to be surrounded by people that I love and care about and that are relying on me, or do I want to be all by myself? And I've always like exhaled and been like, I can't do this by myself, right? Let's go at it with a gang. And right or wrong, right? You have a lot more to lose in those situations, but man, you've got so much richness.
So my husband was actually talking to me about this, I think this morning, about game theory and how there's this interesting research on game theory and how it might be able to be applied to the decisions we make as human beings, right? But this idea where people who are most successful in game theory are those that band together in small communities and they have boundaries with each other, but they ultimately choose to trust each other and do it together. Then they're the most successful, more than the person who kind of one-ups the other person, right? It's like one person gets to choose, do we each get 50%, or one person can, winner takes all, and they kind of betray the other person, Hunger Games style. But it always works better long-term when people band together in the small community, right? And have the boundaries with each other, but do it together. It's best for everyone.
I love that.
But we don't, I feel like that's sort of lost in a lot of American society. Like even physically, we don't live, we're like live online now.
Yeah, it's not real. There's I think she's out of University of Houston, and her name's escaping me. But basically, she studies when cultures implode, when they fall in on themselves. And she laid out a path, and it was pretty remarkable. Gosh, I wish I could think of her name. I'm sorry. But here's what she says. The greatest hedge is not a year's worth of food. And the greatest hedge isn't a whole bunch of weapons. The greatest hedge against when it all goes down, whatever it is to have a great relationship with your neighbors.
So good.
You all know each other. You all can call each other.
Neighbors?
Do you know your neighbors? And we just have a culture that doesn't have that. It doesn't have it. It's gone. It is gone. It doesn't exist. Everything's a transaction. And I actually tried to get to the bottom of that a couple of years ago. Like, where did that start? And I don't think it started in a bad place. I think it started with the worst thing to do is to ask your friend to drop you off at the airport. It's just the worst. And
meaning like it's so mean to your friend.
Yeah. We give me a ride to the airport. Like, oh, geez,
just I'll pay for your Uber, right?
Well, now you can just Uber,
I know, you
right?
pay for their Uber.
And instead of getting eggs next door, I just Instacart it. They just bring it to my house. And so these
you don't want to put out anyone. You don't want to be a burden.
I don't want to be a burden. And instead of the other part of the psychology, which is the greatest gift you can give somebody, is a chance to allow them to help in your life. Yeah, what a gift, right? And we've just taken that from our society, just plucked it out, and we made everything a transaction, and we are dying of loneliness, and it's heartbreaking.
Okay, so would the advice that follows then be like, obviously meet your neighbors. If you're an apartment complex, meet your neighbors still. Knock on the door, ask for a stick of butter. I mean,
yeah.
Like or bring a plate of cookies first, and then like a week later, ask for.
Well, I think it is. I'm gonna go. I always tell people go first. And by the way, it's not just
go first in asking or giving.
Both.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah, go first.
That's great.
And it doesn't have to be an apartment. I live on 6 acres out in the woods outside of Nashville. And
what's your address, John?
Yeah, my neighbor is 75, 76, and he's been there for 1,000 years, right? The family land. And my driveway washed out. When it rains really hard, I've got a long 1/4-mile gravel driveway, and it washed completely out. And then one morning, I see him out there on his tractor, and he graded the whole thing for me and went home. Well, I know how much that costs to hire somebody because it's expensive. And I put some cash in an envelope and gave it to my son. And I said, run over there and give this to our neighbor. He did. And then a few weeks later, I was driving out, and he was piddling by the street, and he stopped my car and kind of forcefully said, don't ever give me money again. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna let you work on my property. I'm gonna pay you. And he said, I'm your neighbor. And I was kind of like, okay. Well, it washed out again a few months later. He did it again. And this time, my wife's got these like massive gardens. And so she put together a basket, and it had a bunch of eggs in it from our chickens, and she had made some sourdough bread. She treats her sourdough better than me
awesome.
Sometimes. It's amazing. It was
I
a basket.
Be your neighbor.
It's pretty rad. But we took this basket over, and he started crying. This old mid-70s, like he was out working on his weeds, and he came over and gave me a big sweaty hug, and I realized, oh, that's neighbor. Right? It's not, I'm not going to pay you. It's not, we're both doing this thing together. And you had some extra awesome. I had some extra awesome. And it was just a different way to do it. And that was I'm glad that my young son was with me because he got to experience his old man getting schooled by 2 generations before me. And it was good for everybody. It was pretty neat. But again, we've lost that. And so I think, kind of like 200 years ago, we had to travel a long way to get food. We don't have to do that anymore. So we have to go to gyms, right? We have to inject uncomfortable situations. I think it's the same with community. We have to kind of force feed it sometimes until our bodies go, so much safer, right? That I've got people I can call.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And part of that too is like choosing to choose a place.
That's it. Yeah.
Because I think too, there's we're so transitory. You know, you're young, you're at college, and then you're like deciding, okay, where am I going to live? You try this job out in this big city maybe, and you know, maybe you don't want to live in your hometown. You know, you're going to go choose something different, but we're so unrooted.
And you keep that long text thread that's mostly memes that are really funny of your old high school or college friends. And it's funny and it's awesome. That's not connection, right? And
it's funny you say that because I've heard a lot of people say, I felt the most connected in high school or college, and I've never found that since.
you know why? Because I was like, there's a reason 40-year-old guys still get together and talk about the big game. Or there's a reason 40-year-old women get together and still talk about the sorority party that one time that Susie got real drunk and whatever. They still talk about that because that was the last time they were a part of something bigger than themselves. That was it. It's the reason my buddies who are in the military, they all get together and tell the same stories all the time. That was the last time they were a part of something that was bigger than just what's my next promotion and what's my kid's little league game going to do, that kind of thing. I think that's where some of the illness in travel sports has come from, is parents trying to use that as I'm part of something bigger than myself. And it's like, no, dude, that's little league, man. Those kids are 9. This isn't for you, right? And they can't stop because their bodies, like literally our bodies are so desperate to belong. And as nobody goes to church anymore. We've pulled apart civics. Nobody does civic stuff anymore. The local service organizations are all falling apart and changing, and there's just not a thing that you're a part of. And so you have to online game. That's about what you got, right? Or you have to join a political party.
I was just gonna say,
That's
politics
it.
has replaced
It's the new religion.
belonging. Yeah.
And
Wow.
at least with the religion, there was here's the goal. Politics now is there's no destination. Nobody's putting something on the table saying, here's where we're all going to go. Politics is just saying, like, I'm not going to be that guy.
It's a tribe.
You don't be them because we're not them.
Wow.
And they're like, well, we're not them, right? Nobody's putting a vision saying, here's where we could all be. And so I think we're desperate for that.
Okay. I agree with what you're saying, and I'm sad to agree. And my husband and I talk about this a lot, but like, how do we build community where we're at?
Yeah.
And we had aspects of it growing up, you know, partly because we were I was homeschooled. So like you had your homeschool community.
Yeah.
I was raised evangelical. So you had your church community. So I did have that blessing of like having these like very specific communities. How do people build that today?
I think
You mentioned the neighbor thing, like bring the
gotta
bread
go be
over.
weird.
Be weird.
Yeah. I mean, like I always tell you got to go first and you just got to be weird. And I think underneath that, like I'm tongue in cheek, but I think you have to start taking risks.
What does that look like for like the, 30-year-old single woman or maybe the 45-year-old dad? Like what do you mean by risks? Community risks, community building risks.
One thing I coach people on, like, if they're struggling with anxiety, I tell them once a week, you have to invite somebody over and you have to leave one thing out, like a thing of laundry, or you have to leave dishes out. Because right now we do it so infrequently that human interaction has become a performance. I have to look right. And your body knows you're on a stage, and it would be failing if it let you sleep because you're performing, right? You're all by yourself. And if you screw this up, this person in your tribe leaves, and you have to push through. Like, no, I love you just because you're you, and I don't care if you've got stuff out at your house. I don't care, right? I went home a place in West Texas where I spent about 20 years, about a year ago, and 2 of my oldest friends on the planet and their wives were all very close. And I was doing a speaking event there. I went and we all went to dinner. And because I was trying to be cool and I was always the poor kid. I always didn't have enough money. And those guys covered me for years. They covered my rent. Those guys were awesome. And I've had a few. Your friends. Those 2 buddies. And I had back-to-back best-selling books like in successive years. I had a wild couple of years. And so I stuck my debit card behind me to the waiter as he walked by, and he just grabbed it very nonchalantly and walked on, and just to wink, wink, pay for the meal. And when they brought the check, it was already paid, and I was so like, yeah,
you've arrived.
And my buddy, he was like, you will never do that again. And I was like, no, you covered me, I get to do that. And he said, no, that's not why we love you. And it was this, he's like, you're our friend. Like, we're not all going to hang out just because you had a good year and you suddenly think you're famous. Like, that's not how this is going to go. Like, we've known you for 30 years. Like, and it was this kind of performance is not accepted here because we love you. And that's what we need.
Did they want to pay because you were visiting them? Is that it?
I was in there. It was hospitality.
It was hospitality.
Right? It's
so
hospitality.
You were
and
like,
I took that from them. All right. And I took their, like I'm back in their home now because I don't live there anymore. And I took it. Right. And so that was a good reminder, like these performative things. So if you're 30 and you're single, know this, it's like oxygen. You have to have people. And your body would be failing you if it let you sleep all night. It just would be, because your body knows you're all by yourself. So you got to be weird and invite people to your house, or start a bowling league, or start a book club at work. Do something and get together once a week or twice a month and start putting yourself in positions. And when people don't show up, feel it. That's uncomfortable. That's the worst, right? And it's not about you. They didn't come because they got stuff going on in their life, whether they're ashamed or they're embarrassed or they're anxious or whatever. It's not about you. It's okay. But one person will come and it will be awkward and weird, or maybe two people will come. And my hope is if you keep showing up and you keep showing up, that people will keep showing up, right? I think, I don't know if it may have been just before you, but when I was really young, that show Cheers was on. And that was the tag. Like, we want to go where everybody knows your name. And the people would walk into this bar and everyone would yell their name. Norm, they'd all yell their name. And I think it was just as the American culture was pulling itself apart. And I think everyone wanted that. So they're just grasping at ghosts. They wanted that. And so I get a choice as whether I'm going to recreate that or not.
There was, we just baptized our daughter.
Yeah.
And we were taking this online course on baptism, which we're like, we know we've done baptism classes before, but the parish was like, you got to do this little course. We're like, all right. And it was with Father Mike Schmitz, who I love, who's very cool. I don't know if you've come across his stuff, but he did a great job with this course. We're like, hey, this isn't too bad. I'm enjoying this. But he talked about the power of a name and belonging in the course. And he's like, baptism is belonging to the family of God. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah, you're washed clean of original sin, but you're being baptized into what? Into a family,
right.
eternal family by name.
Yeah.
It's your name. And I was just really reflecting on that. Like, we don't operate that way too much in modern society. We're so adrift, even from our own families, unfortunately, many people, all the trauma, division, like agitation, and then, you know, the fear of creating new families or the struggle to even create your own family. You can't find a spouse, this and that. You divorce, all this stuff. And then, like you're saying, in our communities, like how many people do you know, like people listening, how many people do you know where you can sit in a room with them, be totally yourself, speak freely about yourself, be like, know that you're not going to be judged. It's a safe place. You can just do whatever with them or do nothing with them. And you have that level of comfort, and they live close to you. This is not just that friend from high school.
That's the magic. It has to be in proximity.
It's someone you see like once a week at least.
Right.
Do you have that person? Maybe you do in your spouse. Okay, great. Outside of your spouse, does that person exist in your life?
Well, I think we actually bury our spouses a lot because I think we're so lonely that we expect them to carry everything, and they end up being a trash bin for our day, right? Ooh. We go home and we have no one to talk to about the hard stuff, and so we dump it all there. And we know they've had a hard day, so we kind of hedge the good stuff, and it just kind of gets quiet. And then you end up with these parallel lives, and you end up on the couch, and you're 6 inches from each other, but you're 6,000 miles away because he's got his phone and you got your iPad, and you end up, you know what I mean? It just happens. And if you have some place where, like, I love you, but these are the women that I'm surrounding myself with, and I need a week with them, and that's the health of this family relies on that. And you got to go. My wife will kick me out. All right, if there's fights, she's like, get out of my house and go watch the fights with your buddies, because she knows I get a better husband. I get a guy who sleeps a little bit deeper. I get a guy who laughs a little bit more in the morning. He's not so grumpy, right? And it's never convenient, especially these days. And housing's expensive, right? So you have to live so far. It's hard. And I think the challenge is, since it's hard, we just think, well, then I'm not going to do it. And I think it's killing us. So you have to. And I want to double click on something. I think I'm saying this out loud for the first time, so I'm thinking out loud. I think we have made faith lonely because we've individualized it so much. What is this thing going to do for me now and in some life to come? And we've lost no. You are now part of a family.
A community.
Forever.
A messy community.
An ugly, messy with some crazy
Saints
uncles
and
and some weird cousins. You're in a gang, right? And if you need something, that's what we're for.
You know, it's funny you say that because it really convicted me. Father Mike Schmitz convicted me, listening to his Belonging Ascensions Press course. I'm giving them a free shout out right here, guys. But because when you talk about the belonging to the family, and, I became Catholic 15 years ago. So I love my evangelical brothers and sisters. I love my Orthodox. Like, we're all ultimately in baptism. We're all one big family, right? Go. But it just convicted me about my fellow Christians are my family. Because I feel like it's easy to point fingers at other Christians and I don't like the way they're doing this or that, or they're too far left or too far right or whatever, right? Yeah. And if you're baptized, if you're part of the family, you're my brother and my sister in Christ. And there's a real belonging there and a responsibility there for me to look out for you and care about you. Yeah. And if you annoy me, I should care about you probably a little more by praying for you.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I kind of knew that, but it really hit home that this idea of an actual physical family, a belonging, it's actually even more significant even than your flesh and blood. Because your spiritual bonds are for eternity.
And what's the best way to take something down that's important? You divide it up from the inside out. And it's so much easier to point out all the different teams who are different than to sit down and say, all right, we agree on 98% of this. Let's argue about this because on the peripheries or on the edges. And by the way, can we take care of widows and feed orphans, right? Can we start there, right? And we just can't do that. We're not doing that. And I think the witness to the world is embarrassing sometimes, right? Because my gosh, they'll know me by the love you have for each other.
Yes, exactly. Well, you said the thing earlier about what do? You get weird, you invite people, you start a polling league. I mean, you mentioned the widows and the orphans. There's so much tangible need in our communities. I think a lot of them are spiritual needs, emotional needs, because, we have more abundance physically than in any other, I think, century in human history. Just the sheer amount of food, and everyone has an iPhone, even in the third world. That's crazy. That's a new thing in the last century that's happened, post-industrial revolution. There's new technology that's being developed that can make larger yields for food and bioengineer the food to make it even more healthy. I mean, there's all the things that are happening in that space, but what can we do to be inventive or take risks at least to serve the emotional and spiritual needs of the community? What does that look like? Got some ideas?
Yeah, because I think all those things allow us to get further and further away from humanity. And I think he was a songwriter, and since his passing, I think has become, more of a theologian than a songwriter. But Rich Mullins says, we so often over-spiritualize Jesus. And we miss the guy who defied all social convention, broke the rules and went and met the woman at the well and said, gave her a purpose. He give me some water. She's like, you're not supposed to be talking to me. I'm not supposed to do anything for you. And he's like, I don't know, I'm thirsty. And then he's like, I see you. And you got value. And I know you. And then at the very end was, hey, there's another way to do your life. There's another way you can have peace. And it wasn't yelling at the woman at the well, when you get your life right, then this, and then this, and then I'll give you a purpose. It was the complete opposite.
It was personal.
Yeah. And it was putting hands on. I think we talk about leprosy and we talk about the miracle of it all. We miss the human part.
Or the little children. Because he said, let the kids come to me. Yeah. They were not supposed to be in that space.
Right.
And he's like, it's messy, it's crazy.
Yeah.
There's kids
children were cattle, they're property.
Yeah, kids don't just do what you always want them to do, but he's like, let them come and sit on my lap.
So there's, I have one of the talks I give, and there's always this section, it's about trauma. And there's always a little moment when I always stop and say, my dream is to just have an event that people would pay. And there'll be me in a hotel lobby, and they'll walk all the way down, and I'm just going to put my hands on your face. I'm going to be real awkward, and I'm going to look at your eyes way past it's comfortable. I'm going to say, I love you. That's it. That's the whole conference. And then we're going to the next person. One time I was doing this. No, I've never done it. Yeah. It was kind of for theater.
I see. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, whenever I talk about trauma, I'm always keeping my eyes open for somebody in the audience who's like, oh yeah, really? You're talking about trauma? Can I tell you about my life, right? So I'm in Phoenix doing this, and this man is in the back. And at the end, during Q&A, I saw him wheeling himself, and he turned down the main aisle, and it was a double amputee. His legs both were removed. And he wheeled himself all the way down to the microphone. When he got closer, he was covered in moles. It's tough. And he said, I want to talk to you about that thing you said. And I said, what is that? And he said, about touching people's face. And I said, oh yeah. And I was like, here it comes, man. He's going to say, like, you want to hear my story? And he was going to be right. And he said, well, you come down here and do that for me. Nobody's touched me in a long time.
Whoa.
And it got real silent. And one of the most beautiful things, the person filming it turned the camera off and said, hey, I don't film holy moments. I hope that was okay. And I was like, that's right. But that's the story of the lepers that we miss. Of course, yeah. And it was a holy moment.
7weekscoffee.com is America's pro-life coffee company. This is gourmet, small batch, ethically sourced coffee that you're going to love. There's every kind of roast, light, medium, dark, different origins. You're going to love 7 Weeks Coffee. So go to 7weekscoffee.com today. Know that whenever you order coffee from there, you are supporting the pro-life movement. 10% of all proceeds go directly to the pro-life movement, to pregnancy resource centers. That's 10% of all revenue, not just profits. And if you join the Heartbeat Club over at 7weekscoffee.com, you can get 25% off your first order of coffee using the code Lila at checkout. So that's 7weekscoffee.com. Join the Heartbeat Club, get coffee sent to your door every single month, and get 25% off your first order by using the code Lila at checkout. And but even in that, like the physical touch.
That's it.
Physical touch, I think too, because we're so sexualized and we're so confused and things are so divisive, even that physical touch has been so...
Jesus touched a leper.
Yeah.
Those guys who had gone 1, 2, 5, 10 years without human contact. And he's like, no, I got you. So there's a miracle part, and that's fantastic and cool. But he went to the least of these and was in their presence and put his hand on their shoulder and said, I see you, right? And at one university I worked at, it was a large research university, during the HR onboarding, they recommended the air high five to avoid any confusion, right? Like, let's just drain all of human contact out of our society. And there's creepers and there's gross people and there's idiots everywhere. And if you take touch out of the human experience, we die, right? And so we have to find a balance, but it's costing us everything. And so at this point, I just go be weird. Just go be weird. Pick up the tab if you can, right? Because people are struggling. Cool.
Pay it forward even at the store, right? Like,
well, it's like this, like
the guy's coffee behind you in line, get his coffee.
Well, even that, but like, hey, let's go to coffee. I'm buying because I know you're struggling.
Yeah.
Right.
Or come over for lunch.
Yeah. Or I'm buying concert tickets and they're so stupid expensive right now. I don't want to not go to the show, and I'm not going to go by myself. In 10 years, I'm going to be super glad you and I went and jumped up and down and screamed and sang our heads off. I'm not going to remember that $120. I'm just not, right? And if you can't do that, then we're going to figure something else out. But it's stopping with some of the old social hurdles. And it's like, we're all going to the show. I'm going to figure it out, but we're all going to the show. Like, we need to go to that concert. And if you can Venmo me, great. If you can't, great. But we're going to the show. Because I'd rather that experience singing together. And I think that's just has to be how we reorient what we're doing.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about like children and, I mean, having little ones myself and just being involved in pro-life work and just children not being valued, not being, even that trust that we can handle it. I think that's a lot of the fear behind abortion is I can't do this and it's better to kill. It's better to not, they don't think about it as killing typically. It's better to just erase this pregnancy like it never happened. And so there's just again, rejection of the risk of the whole thing, the whole project of life and children. But even today with the way we treat young kids, I mean, I'm thinking about like the snoo. I don't know if you saw, how old's your youngest?
I have a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Okay. So the snoo like got popular during the pandemic, I think. Okay. It's this bassinet that rocks the baby for you.
Wow.
You strap him in real tight. And it even shushing noises. So it like does the rocking. You don't have to, you have a robot rocker for your baby, right? Wow. And so I was a brand new mom and my husband and I are like, okay, it's very expensive, but we're going to spring for this because this one friend is like, it just helped us sleep all night. And so, but I put my little tiny newborn first child and this like robot is rocking my baby for me. And he's like screaming and then it rocks him faster and then he like falls asleep. And after a little while, again, not to judge people who sometimes use snooze, but we end up just not using it. Because I thought about the time of life that I have when he's little, when he wants physical touch. He wants to be close. He wants to smell me. He wants to feel me. He wants me.
Yeah.
At least another human being, dad, maybe babysitter, sometimes grandma, but he needs parents. He needs love,
He
right?
needs you. Yeah.
He
I know
needs
it's
me.
not cool to say that, and I know it's not, but like physiologically,
He needs mom.
his body's been programmed by by your heartbeat, right?
Yes. Thank you for saying that, John.
It's not cool to say, but it is.
Yeah.
And dads are awesome and important, but I
Yeah.
wasn't as important as my wife was.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
it just is. You know what I mean? And I think as long as we stop, hopefully that's not shaming to somebody who's working 3 jobs trying to put food on the table.
Or to someone who uses a snoo, again, no, but
it is what it is, right?
And it's just like, how do we make all of our choices in life to maximize the physicality, like being there with our family, especially like young children need mom, right? And physically just holding them. I mean, I think about the power of a hug because you're talking about
It's
touch.
everything, yeah.
For a young child, like how often do we really hug our kids?
Yeah.
How often do we hug our spouse? How often do we hug our friend?
Yeah.
What about those people who say like, my love language is not touch, so don't touch me?
I mean,
They just need to be touched. You just like hug them more.
no,
Like,
I mean, man, that's a whole rabbit hole.
All right.
The whole, we were just talking about this in the car on the way over. I think some of those, like what's your love language or what's your Enneagram number or what's your Myers-Briggs, whatever, those are fun, reflective tools, but they're not gospel. And they're not, a lot of them aren't scientifically backed at all. And so they have made their way into our culture as, I don't give gifts because that's not my love language.
wait, so someone says, hey, I don't do touch. I don't do hugs.
I would want to know, tell me about that. Because that's a core
interesting.
need,
There you
right?
go,
It's a core
there you
need.
go.
And man, maybe there's any number of reasons why. Hugging wasn't safe growing up for me. I don't like it. I've been having to defend and protect myself my whole life. I had to be like this, right? Awesome. Like that's an important part of the story. And it's not to force hugging on anybody at all, but let's get to the root of it. Let's don't take it just as a personality trait that's unchangeable, right? And your kid might be, you know what I mean? I function best with 8 hours of sleep. I just do. I wish I didn't. I just do. If I have a newborn, I got to hold my kid. And it just is, right? And that means I'm going to have to really cash in on some other things in my life for a season. And I wish I didn't have to do that, but I do. It's just owning reality. And we have a culture that allows us to push off reality in so many different parts of our life. We can't afford it. We'll just borrow it. I'm exhausted. Let's just put it in the robot.
Or aborted, unfortunately. That's the other
there's
part of
so
it.
many other plans that we have, right? And so I think core to our being psychologically well is just owning reality. This is the world I'm in right now, and I'm going to own it. And let's be real about it. And what's the state of my marriage? What's the state of my parenting? What's the state of my health? And then we can make some real decisions moving forward. We just keep avoiding it all. And if somebody calls it out in us, then we instantly go to shame. We instantly go to anger, and we instantly go to rage. And I think a lot of that covers up grief. Like, I'm just tired, right? And nobody gives us permission to not put our kid in every travel sport and every dance team. And nobody gives us permission to let our kids, dude, your kids can get B's. Everyone's going to live. It's going to be fine, right? Nobody gives you permission to go to community college if you can't afford X, Y, and Z. Like, nobody gives you permission to do that. And so every parent I know is walking around feeling like a giant failure factory 24/7 because the entire culture has said, you're not doing enough. And can I tell you the greatest, of all the degrees I got, all the people I've sat with, the greatest piece of parenting advice I've ever received was from Jack Black. And
The actor?
The actor.
From the Trains, Planes, and Automobiles movie?
That's
no.
John Candy. It's Jack Black from Little Panda.
Okay. Okay.
Tenacious D, yeah. But he said, don't ever try to make a happy kid happier. And he went on to talk about how his kid, and I'm messing up the story, but was playing in the mud with a stick or something. And he was like, I'm Jack Black. Like, I'm a multi-million. Like, my kid's going to do like elevated things.
It's going to be a golden stick.
He said my kid ended up 3 hours later, completely overstimulated, sugared out of his mind. And it was because I made that exchange about me. What I could have done, should have done, is sat down in the mud and played with my kid. And so we over what's the right word? We over create a world that our kids need and they don't. They just want us, man. And it can be little, like my 14-year-old, when he started 6th grade, we started going to breakfast every Tuesday at a Waffle House. My son it's a laboratory, man. My son gets to see me interact with the waitress who no one wants to be working at Waffle House at 6:30 in the morning. They don't. He gets to see how we tip. He gets to see how when you tip somebody and you are obnoxious about it, and during Christmas, how they chase you out in the parking lot sobbing like you just gave their family Christmas, right? He gets to see all that. It's not just talking about it. And when your food's bad or it's late and you still honor the waitress because it's not her fault, but because he gets to learn all that and how you talk to the other people. And he gets to feel like, man, the most important person in my dad's world today is me. It's me. And because it was 45 minutes before I dropped him off at school, right? So we think it has to be this and this. We have to go to Disneyland. You don't. Just show up for your kid. Just show up and just show up and just show up. And the same with your spouse and same with your friends and same with, we over dramatize it all. Just show up, man.
Why do we over dramatize it so much? I mean, of course, people listening are like, well, the marketing and the media and the, comparison, keeping up with the Joneses.
It goes all the way back to what we were talking about because I don't think I'm enough. I don't think you know what I mean? I just know all the ways I wish I was
like, I have to be more successful, wealthier, smarter.
I've got to give my kid
beautiful.
These shoes, this shirt, these clothes, this experience because
it's not enough to just be human.
No, it's not. Yeah. And the culture's done a remarkable job convincing us we're not enough. And that just gets passed on to our spouses and to our kids and to our neighbors and our communities. And so it's like, just tell me, who are we all hating? I'm on your team. So just tell me and okay. Right.
And that's rooted in what? I'm not enough is rooted in not experiencing, not having that lived experience and holding on to it of being loved as you are unconditionally by God, who's all of enough, who's everything that there possibly is. Like what does that root back to?
Probably. I mean, as a person of faith, I would put a lot of it there. Is that as a culture, we've cut all the tethers to a shared story that we're all a part of, a shared team,
a shared family,
like
the family of God.
Yeah. And when you get down to brass tacks, I think my granddad came home from World War II, and then my dad got a job, and then halfway through my childhood, my mom got a job, and then the world suddenly needed 2 incomes to survive, and the best way we could keep up this life was I got to make more money, I got to make more, I got to be busier, and then it just spun out, and then you had a whole band of kids who raise themselves, and then you have another band of kids who just have gone whoosh into their phones, and it just played itself out. And I have a lot of hope too. Like before I left the university system, that's where I spent most of my career, was in universities. It was the students that were starting, the 18-year-olds that were like, everybody stack your phone up and the first person to grab it at dinner has to pay for dinner. They were starting to self-select out, right? It was like kids realizing, I don't like smoking, I feel bad. Right. There was no morality to it. I don't feel good.
They've done polls and surveys where people say, if you could do you want your Instagram taken away, your TikTok taken away? And they're like, no. Okay. If everyone else, if we just deleted the app, everyone's like, take it.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is for younger people. Yeah. Some older people are like, I still like it, but like for young people, like, I don't like this thing that I'm doing. This constant performance, this constant like comparison, this constant like addiction.
Does. And every parent has that feeling in their stomach. No parent feels good about it. I remember it was a documentary about like, I don't want to blast any, I think it was Country Crock, about margarine. And they were talking to these grandmas, and the grandmothers were like, we knew it was bad. Like we knew in our guts.
Cisco or Crisco.
Whatever it was. Yeah. But they were like, no, but they said we're hurting our kids. When these scientists came out and said, stop giving your kids butter, that's got fat in it. Give them this processed soybean oil, whatever it was. Coats. Right. And it was this.
You double question. You question your gut. Yeah. And you just go with the expert.
And you're like, okay, if I don't hurt my kids, I don't hurt my kids. And so
fear.
We got down a rabbit hole. And so none of us trust ourselves, and so we just outsource it, and we don't have communities. I know I get real emotional. Like I get overly dramatic about everything. 2 of my best friends on planet Earth, one is the CFO of an HVAC company, and one's a high-level bank examiner. Those 2 guys are like walking Xanaxes, right? They're just like stable. And so I can call and be like, can you believe? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly what your wife should have said to you because you're an idiot, right? And I need that accountability. But I've got people in my life that I bounce that off of. And if you go through life and you're all you've got, man, that's a tough
See, and there's some people, just like the physical touch thing, there's some people who are like, well, I'm an internal processor. I'm more of an introvert. I am more private by nature.
I'm an introvert. It doesn't matter.
You're an introvert?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't think that thing down with you, but I can. Would you say the same thing about the love languages thing? If someone says, well, I'm really private, that's just the way I am culturally.
Cool. Then find a small group.
You still need those guys, those girls, whatever.
That's like just saying like, I can't drink 9 glasses of water a day. Okay, well, you need 6. You can't not drink water anymore, right? Or your body will shrivel up and turn to dust, right? It's the same thing. It's just, human contact is scary and it's vulnerable and you can get rejected. And I think that's the thing that haunts most of us. That idea of like, here's me, do you still love me? And then I think we're so scared of the answer to that question. And going back to the faith thing, I think that's where that's so important. Because now you're my family. Like, you're never going to be out of my family. Like, you're here. And a rad thing we did the other night, my son has this group of rad 8th graders. And they've been together for a long time. And they are every bit middle school as you could possibly be. And it's everything from, I'm a podcaster, to one guy's an executive, one guy just was a Walmart executive, another guy like does breaks. I mean, it's
wait, the 8th graders?
No, their parents.
Oh, the
parents are all over the
all
place.
Over the spectrum,
right?
Yeah.
One guy works at manages a deli, and so everybody's all over the place. But this gang found themselves 3 years ago, and they've been ride or die. And we had this little ceremony for them at the end of 8th grade, and it was. But I asked all the dads, we all write something, and it was cool how many dads were like, before I go, know this now as you enter high school. You can't do a thing that I won't come get you. Like, you can't, there will not be a thing that a situation you find yourself in that I'll stop loving you. And I think if we knew that about our neighbors, if we knew that about our
But if
spouses,
it's murder, I'll take you to the police office. Or the
I'll sit with you. Yeah, I've got that call. I've got that call. Like my son, and I don't even know if it aired. My son, I just got arrested for child pornography. And do I hire a big fancy attorney? I know he did it. I was like, no, because you got to get that kid. I've got a child. I got a little girl. Get that guy off the street. And also, you're his mom. So
you go and
I'm going to hold your hand while you go
heavy.
Right?
That's heavy.
I'll be with you when you accept your consequences.
And I'm not going to try to protect you from the consequences of your action that can actually help protect other people.
I'm going to love you. Yeah, I'm going to love you through the messiest of the messy, right? And I don't think any of us, I don't think we have that. I don't think our parents they didn't have a model for it. My granddad came from World War II. He didn't have that model, right? And my dad was a homicide detective. Like, they don't have that. He wasn't trained on what's the right things to say. So that's okay. But I think the more we can be anchored into a community that come what may. My group of guys, I'll never forget this. When I first met them, and I was kind of just mouthing off and running my mouth. And my wife and I are like this, but I had moved 6 months earlier, and she was finishing up her research before she moved. And there's a group of 6 or 7 of us, and they're like, hey, do you need anything? And I was like, yeah, I'm all by myself for like 6 months. Does anyone know, like where do you go find dates in this town? And I was trying to make a joke. It landed real flat. It wasn't funny at all. But one of the guys, his name's Kevin, he looked at me and he said, hey, you don't know us very well, so just so we're all everybody's on the same page. If you cheat on your wife, you better hope to God she finds you before we do. And it was kind of this.
That's awesome.
I looked up and all the guys.
That's so refreshing.
They were all looking at, and it was like, okay, guys, I was playing, right? And I know those guys love me, and I know if that happened, they'd be with me. But here's the standard. Here's who we're going to be.
That's so rare, though, because I think there's still a lot of communities where people like have their buddy that they get burgers with, or they do the gym with, or their girlfriend that they go to the concert with. But are they somebody that's not just sharing time with them, but somebody that's going to hold them accountable and get to know them at a deeper level?
But I only have permission to hold you accountable after I said I see you and I love you, right? And you
have to have a shared morality too, that you are going to be accountable around.
Maybe. I think you have
Like
to have
cheating is wrong.
You have to have shared values. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, by the way, you're new here.
Because some people
so
think cheating is not a big deal.
Or they might think it's a big deal, but they also think you do you. Right?
Right, exactly.
And I can divorce this part of you for this. But I go back to the woman that Jesus, who was caught in adultery. They didn't share that. But he got between her and the guys that were about to stone her to death. And he defended first before there were shared values. And then he said, hey, like there's another way you can live, right? And so I think sometimes it is shared values and sometimes it is, no, this is just who I am. This is my set of values. I'm going to protect and defend, and then I'll call you into something higher. But I'm going to go first. And I think we get caught up in the whose team people are on and just saying, hey, we don't talk to each other like that here. I don't care who you are, right? I wasn't on this guy's team yet. I just shown up. And he's like, hey, that's not even funny. And by the way, he's a clown. Like he's one of the most obnoxious, funny. If you ever hears this, I delete our text threads every once in a while, just because.
But it's like it took courage from him to maybe not for him personally because he's so used to being courageous, so he's naturally courageous. But for somebody else to like be the person in the friend group to be like, nah, I don't think that's good. But doing it in that way where they see you, they want to get to know you, they love you.
Yeah.
But they're willing to say, hey,
this is how we roll.
This is a problem.
This is how we roll. That's right. Yeah.
That takes moral courage.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. And I'm willing to have you not like me. I'm okay with that. I'm all grown up. Right?
But he's okay with it too because he's got other love in his life. It sounds
exactly
like
right. He's anchored in.
He's anchored in.
He's not untethered.
He's
saying,
stronger.
do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? He's like, no, I'm loved.
Yeah.
And when you're anchored in and when you're loved, then you can go be the change that people need. I think a lot of us try to go fix everything unanchored, and you just end up.
You can't do it alone.
You get absorbed.
Yeah, you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to ask you because this is a question I get a ton, and when I do like an Instagram story, and it's always like, what are the Q&A? And usually the question, I get at least several of these questions, which have to do with finding a spouse. Like, how do I find someone, or how do I know they're the one? Or, I mean, a lot of people, at least who listen to this podcast, there's a lot of married people, but there's a lot of people who aren't married who want to get married.
Yeah. Well, one, I think it's important to say I'm a terrible person to ask that. I've been with the same person for like a quarter century. So
come on, John, you've got some stuff for me. I know you do. You've got that on your show, I'm sure.
All the time.
Like where do we meet people? I heard some people say like, I'm so done with dating apps. I'm like treat it like a job. Do the dating app thing. Yeah. This world, unfortunately, because the community is so broken down. I mean, get involved in the community. Put yourself out there.
That's it. I think it's both and. I think the challenge with the dating apps is they... I was just talking about this with somebody recently. My wife grew up on some acres outside of her small town. Her parents were school teachers, and she listened to country music. I did not. I was like a punk rock kid, and we had very different lives. I grew up in Houston, and the Astrodome was like this shrine where the Astros played and the Oilers played. Well, they were closing it down and had one last event. And she had just moved to town, and I think we were engaged at the time. But this guy named George Strait was playing there, this country legend. I'd heard the name. I didn't know George Strait. When I told her, she was like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. So I did everything I could, and I called this guy who knew this guy and called that guy, and I got 2 tickets. And he got us great seats. And when we got there, it was a lot, bajillions of people. It's completely sold out. The president comes in on a horse.
George Strait?
Yes. I mean, it was such a...
To come watch the concert on a horse?
It was, well, it was just part of the theater.
Oh, sorry.
Like George, I think it was George, it was Bush 1, comes in on a horse.
Oh, I see.
And there's fireworks inside. It was wild. And I look over and my wife is crying. She knew every word. And I'd known her for 5 years, 6 years at this point. I got to experience this. I had no idea. And back up a few years before we got married, I had her come. I was like, hey, part of the dating thing, you got to go at least one like punk rock show with me. It's midnight before the band even goes on. She's up against the wall in this tiny punk club called Fitzgerald's downtown Houston. And I look over at one point because we were all crashing into each other, and she was smiling ear to ear. Wanted nothing to do with it, but it was just like, I haven't seen you that happy. I say all that to say Nowadays, that would be a checkbox. Like, name your 3 artists that you like. George Strait and this and this. I'd go, okay. And I'd probably pull up 3 songs on Spotify and be like, and I'd move on. And I would miss knowing her, right? And so the apps take all that stuff. It takes all these shared experiences and they turn it into a...
Do you think we're too picky then, in a weird way? Like
1,000% yes.
Like, oh, they don't align in these areas.
I went to a church camp right before I went to college, and they gave us the spiel, like the fear spiel, like the world's going to take away your morals and blah, blah. And so they had us write down 10 uncompromising truths about the person we're going to spend our life with. I've been with the same person for 25 years, and she had 8 out of 10. And one of them, I'm sorry, 2 out of 10. 8 were wrong. And
wait. Uncompromising truths meaning like 6 feet tall, like that
it was
kind of
whatever,
stuff? Whatever
like,
you want.
Whatever.
Put in your order.
These are the non-negotiables because the world's going to get you to negotiate, right? And
That's so funny because I mean,
it was insane.
It's a little insane.
And I was 18,
I can understand the whole
right?
like don't get in bed with each other before marriage. Like yes, check, don't
18.
do that. But the whole like put in your menu, like
I think one of them was like have a sleeve tattoo and drink beer from a bottle. I mean, it was just the stupid stuff when you're 18, right? And so yes, I think we're way too picky about things that don't matter,
and not picky enough maybe about the things that do.
Right. And I think we share
so
lot of. I'm a punk rock kid from Houston, and she is used to ride barrel races and a country music person from West Texas, and we've made a pretty remarkable life together. And no app would have picked it. No app would have picked it. And so I do think you have to play that game, the dating app game, because it is. But as often as possible as you can go out and be weird. Go out and find people to be around.
So I want to drill down into what you're saying because I think it's so important. You're saying be picky about the things that matter and don't sweat the things that don't matter in dating. Otherwise, you may miss.
Right.
You may miss the one.
The most annoying thing early on when we were dating is that she didn't like to go to all my crazy concerts. And then I ended up finding a bunch of great friends that went to those crazy shows with me.
Right, because we want them to be more than...
She can't be 100%.
She can't be everything.
No, she can't. Nobody can carry that weight.
Do you think, though, part of it, too, is connected to just how pornified our society is? So we have these expectations for the physical, the physicality or the physical feeling we may have with them. How much of it is that, too?
Well, I think...
Like when you're swiping, literally, like if you're on a dating app, you're like, oh, I don't like this. I'm going to swipe.
Of course.
Swipe the
well,
other way.
I think it's a distillation. I think all of it comes from lonely. I don't have anybody else. So you have to be everything for me. You have to be my muse. We have to be sexually active into our 90s, which means you have to be hot all the time forever. You have to be the best co-parent. You have to be a co-earner because we can't afford to live this fantasy life to drive this car in this house and whatever. We've just created this insanity, and I expect you to carry all that. You can't. I've got 2 buddies right now, Pete and Blake. We go to a lot of crazy shows. We're too old to be going to some of these concerts, and it's so fun. My wife likes to go to bed at 9 o'clock, right? And so... why in the world would I take that from her? And she's like, thank God he's got friends that he goes to these silly shows with. And she goes to poetry readings downtown with her friend. And I'm really grateful she's got that, right? And so it's being able to have other people in your life so this person doesn't have to carry the weight of your world that was designed, as you talked about earlier, a whole tribe used to carry, right? Your faith community used to carry some of that. Your pastor used to carry some of that. Your people you're digging holes with, your fellow mothers used to do that, carry that stuff with you, right? And now we have nobody. And so you find a romantic person like that you're interested in, you got to carry all of it. And that's madness. And we crush each other under that weight. And so I actually think it's carrying the weight of that. Man, pornography is it's an easy out. Because I can't, it allows me to not get buried, right? Or, I think this is an overgeneralization, but women read it and men watch it, right? There's a reason.
I know, I think it's true.
While the romance stuff is resurged in such a powerful way.
Well, I mean, the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon was a lot of women reading that and watching that stuff more than men, from my understanding. And it's just like we want to...
But it's a way to feel a little more alive because we have that quiet life of desperation. And because I can't carry all of your garbage and all your stuff and all because you have nobody to talk to. Or we outsource it and we have to hire it. So you got to hire a therapist. We've over-therapized everything, right? And so we just have nobody. And so I think, there's a pornification to it. There's an algorithm to it, all that. But we've just sucked the the rhythm of life and the awkward and the weird, which is all the good stuff.
And you're saying that because the people, whether you're in the dating pool or, you're talking about pornography and addictions to pornography and women, into 50 Shades of Grey and all of this like stuff, right?
It's Xanax.
It's like to soothe all of the desire that's broken and down in us. Like we just want this comfort of some kind, or you said we want to feel alive.
Well, I think we've said we have to have a house like this. We have to have this school. We have to drive this car. Our kids have to dress like this and go to these schools. And so we create this world of non-negotiables that no one can carry. And then we have no one to carry it with us. And then we're buried and life gets exhausting and boring and repetitive. And how do you feel alive? I'm just now I can sports gamble on my phone. Sweet. That's like, I'm just going to watch sports because they're doing it. I'm not even playing anymore. My dad was in a softball league. When's the last time you heard that? Right now we just watch professionals play our sports for us. So pornography is a piece of a much bigger people trying to escape their own lives. And
we talked about community earlier as the antidote, as a part of the antidote, right? You need to be embodied in the flesh, doing stuff with people who know you.
Right.
And sharing common causes with them.
Yes.
Is part of it. Even if it's a bowling league, you're trying to I guess win the game. I don't know, but you want to do service with these people. You want to love them, know them as they are. Are there other things too that you would say, generally speaking, you would recommend?
Yeah,
I mean, God, I think is key. Obviously, like you need to know who you are before God, because He's the end.
You have to plug into something bigger than you.
Yeah,
you do. And for me and my faith, that's a Christian faith, but you've got to plug into something because the self-actualization, like the self can't hold, the sinner can't hold, right? It was never designed to hold up the universe. And the more the self becomes the God that we worship at the foot of, the more we pile on there and it can't hold, it can't carry it.
I have tried dozens of skincare brands over the last decade, and I haven't found a brand that I love as much as NimiSkincare.com. NimiSkincare.com creates products with proven ingredients that work, that are clean, that are based on tons of research, and that are simple and easy to use. I love the products because you have this deep hydration cream. I have the brightening sunscreen that I use in the morning. They're easy to use products. They're great for many different skincare types. You can pick your type based on the website. And it's an awesome product. I've never been happier with a skincare line. So go check them out today. It's NimiSkincare.com. Buy some for yourself, buy some for a loved one, buy some as a gift. They're also just beautifully designed and packaged. That's NimiSkincare.com. And you can use the code Lila at checkout for 15% off your order. NimiSkincare.com, Nimi Skincare.com, and use the code Lila at checkout for 15% off your order. So in the dating context, back to the advice you're giving to people who are looking for that relationship, how do you know when, you don't want to be too picky. You want to find someone that also, though, has enough shared values, right? And is going the same direction, like has those same, and values in terms of not just moral values of like, we're not going to have sex before marriage as an example, but we're the kind of people that want to really be transparent with each other.
Right.
We want to get vulnerable with each other. We're the kind of people who want to take these risks of love with our community. Like that's the value beyond just don't do these bad things.
That's
it's like,
exactly
what are we doing positively together? Talk more about that.
You have to spend some time being reflective, and most of us don't do that.
Like most get of your us, journal.
Yeah, I wish there was another way. I've got mine in my bag. I wish I didn't. I wish there was another way to hack that. There's just not.
Meaning you got to do the work of understanding your own desires, understanding your own issue. Like you can't just. There's not like a box you can check to be like, we share values. Okay, it's work. Like
no, and I always tell people, be very concrete at what you anchor your values into. Values should not change very often.
Meaning, like, if your value is, I value honesty.
Right.
What does that mean?
You're going to value honesty. Your beliefs should change all the time. That's why I read new books. That's why I listen to different podcasts. That's why I have interviews. I mean, discussions like this, because I get to meet new people. And I believed that the best expression of this value was X, right? I work with Dave Ramsey, and the joke is always like, how are y'all two together? Like, because we just do things differently.
What do you mean? Are you like what does that mean? Like, you're clearly different personalities. I'll give you that much.
But the idea being like,
I'm just curious, like values wise.
What we always tell people is we both love Jesus and we both want to help people.
I see.
Dave just sometimes
you use a credit card.
I want to I want to hug somebody, and Dave might say you're stupid, right? Or Dave might say like, hey, come sit down. And
So
I'm like,
operationally,
no.
like how you live out generosity.
So the belief of, how do you live out generosity? Do you give $10 to every homeless person that comes up to you? Or someone might say, I know you believe that you're being generous. Here's another way to look at generosity, right? So I want my beliefs to change. I hold them really loosely. And my wife and I believe different things on a number of different issues. Our values are anchored in. So we have a value of curiosity in our house. Like, tell me about that instead of, you can't think that, right? And it allows each other to be anchored in, to go, I'm going to read these 5 weird books about X, Y, and Z and come back and we're going to talk about them because I'm never going to be angry and upset and whatever. And if she's like, I really am starting to believe that God's calling me to X, Y, and Z, like, man, let's go figure that out. Let's be curious about that instead of in this house, right? So I always want these things to be moving and breathing, but our values are etched in there. Right? We will ride or die. We'll figure this thing out.
When you're like dating and looking for someone to potentially be with for life, you want to find that partner. Sounds like what you're saying too can be applied there in terms of you can find someone who you share a value, but how they do that value can look very, very different.
Yes. And
that's okay.
Belief,
like you don't need to do it the same way. And generosity might be an example, but like I think about even my marriage, like, pro-life activism. Like like children are dying. This is like the human rights abuse of our day. It's incredibly horrific. We need to save lives. We can do it in all these different ways. My husband would come into that problem and not go undercover in a Planned Parenthood like I did. Like that's not going to be the way he's going to do that. Right.
He might work for 30 years on a particular policy and the policy gets changed and he exhales, right? And it looks different,
right?
And I think it's when people have a common cause and they start shooting each other instead of saying, okay, I'm a frontline person, I'm a sniper, I'm a recon person, I'm a language person, I'm a decoder. Like everybody's working towards the same thing, whatever that thing happens to be, and it's having patience and peace for people who've got different beliefs about what's the best way to do this thing. And it's hard.
So,
right?
So what are the red flags then? What are the things that you're like, these are the no-go areas to avoid marrying that person who is going to cheat on you or, God forbid, be abusive or just be someone who's just going to like be inward and do that parallel life next to you and not really go deep with you and, get curious with you and get vulnerable with you and get honest with you or
say I'm sorry.
Or say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, say, I
hear so many horror stories. I mean, you hear more than I do because you're a professional horror story collector, basically. Right. But how do you divorce-proof your marriage?
I'm going to say two things.
Beforehand.
Beforehand.
Before you marry them.
Know this, that for all of human history, we got our values, rightly or wrongly, from the tribe we were born into and the faith tradition we were born into. That's where our shared set of values came from. This idea that you go find your values by yourself is brand new. So if that feels wonky and weird, your body does not know how to do that at the nervous system level because it has never had to do that in human history. The second thing is I'm always telling people your feelings are a really important data point. They're important. They don't tell you the truth. That's not their job, right? Similar, like if I had a gallon of milk, I wouldn't measure the length of this table in gallons. The measurement of a gallon is great, but I would measure this in inches or feet, right? And so feelings are good. They just don't tell you the truth. Their job is to keep you alive and to overreact to things because your body just needs to survive till tomorrow. If there's a little twig that snaps in the woods, I'm going to run screaming because it might be a bear. It's probably not, but it might be, right? And I'd rather be wrong than alive. And so I say that as a caveat too. If we're honest, most of us know.
The red flag.
Most of us feel it.
Like we just know
this person's not safe. We know. Or if you think about it this way, the question that saved my marriage, right? We sat down from each other and we're like, how do we want this thing to feel when you get home? And I was like, I want it to be warm. I don't want us to laugh. I want us to have fun. And she was like, okay, then here's what has to be true. You can't X and Y and Z, and you've got to stop this. And it was all true and right. And so ask yourself, like, when I get home from being with this person, do I feel at peace and full of laughter and full of joy and lightness? Or do I exhale because I made it through another date, right? And So rely on that signal to say this person's safe, I'm leaning in, or they're not. And often the competing feeling is I'm going to be alone forever, and you're not. You're not. And so that's your body not telling you the truth, right? And so I'm telling you, I realize I'm talking both sides out of my mouth, but most of the time we're around people and we feel safe and we feel alive or we feel defensive. And I think that's a great, when you're out there trying to establish this by yourself, which again has never happened before, trust your gut. Trust your gut. And you can't cheat proof. You can't 100% guarantee it, right? And that's the risk.
Right.
That's the heartbreaking risk. And
that's the promise. Like, and for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, like we're in this.
Yeah. And we don't have a thing for covenant anymore, right? It used to be covenant, which is I'm signing my life to this. So now it's a contract, right? And attorneys, right? A contract is written to be broken.
Right.
Here's how we will separate things. And that's how we've changed
crazy.
it.
We had on Zuby, who I really love, but we were debating about prenups, and he's like I like covenants, but we should also put in that prenup just in case. And he has obviously his arguments for it, and I respect that people have differing opinions,
sure.
but ultimately I think that's we're always kind of like looking at the horror stories in the culture, looking at the bad stuff, and it's like, okay, just in case, I'm going to have this caveat so that if something goes south, I can jump ship. Yeah. Basically.
And it's the
conditionalism of everything.
That's it. Everything's got an off ramp. And what does it look like?
We fell out of love. On the lighter side, we fell out of love. On the worst side, he's not giving me my needs, so I'm gonna.
That's probably the most like eye rolly cultural statement is this relationship ran its course. We love each other. We will always love each other. One of y'all quit. One of you quit, and that's fine. Or you both quit. But just be honest about it. We stopped working on it, and we stopped waking up every day saying, "How can I love you? How can I love you today?"
Yeah.
We didn't. We made other things a priority, and so I'm going to take ownership of that. I'm going to choose reality here, but don't blame the car
love,
that you didn't put gas in it. Right? It's not the car's fault. The car just did what the car's going to do, and so it's just going back and being honest. And there's no 100% guarantee, that's what makes it so beautiful, I think. And that's what makes it terrifying and scary, especially if you've been hurt before.
Back to the red flag stuff, I really like what you're saying about just the gut check of the experience of the person. Like, does this leave me in peace or does this leave me in chaos, afterwards? How do I feel safe? Do I not?
How does he talk to the waitress?
How does he talk to the waitress? How does he talk to his mother?
How does he talk? How does he tip? Right?
Yeah.
Behavior's a language.
Yeah.
What's he telling the world about what he thinks about the world? And you can see it when somebody's walking into a restaurant. Does he open the door for all three people, or does he just walk in? Right? When it comes to, does this guy go to church and does he give, or does he roll his eyes? Does he always complain about the pastor every time they walk out the door? Is like, you get what I'm saying?
What about longevity though, for like the length of time to really test if this person's being sincere? Because people can put on a show.
They can play. Yeah.
And I remember like before I met my husband, like I had a lot of different dating experiences, and there were definitely guys that like they were super charming, super aggressive in the pursuit of me, and like they were kind of like the love bombing type stuff, but they weren't like super weird. They were just like good at their shtick, whatever it was. But over time, you kind of see like this veneer of behavior. There's sort of holes that start to appear in it, right? And you're like, this is not always like the way. But that takes time to test, right? And especially when you're first getting to know someone and there's infatuation that can be involved. It can be hard to have your head on straight.
Oh, your body has unhooked your head, right? It doesn't want you thinking straight, right? Yeah.
So would you be like,
really
okay,
hard.
wait 1 year before deciding for sure you want to? But then I see like my parents got met and married within 4 months. My parents, and they're married now 40 plus years.
It's been a few years since I looked at the data, but back in grad school, it's been several years. But arranged marriages and traditional Western marriages had about the same. If not, arranged marriages in longevity.
Meaning they last.
Meaning people just woke up every day and decided we're married. We're gonna make this thing work.
Oh, I see. Meaning you can go as far as a chosen. Like if you date and choose someone, the success rate for an arranged marriage is as good.
I think it was better.
Or it's better. I mean, it's probably better because in those communities, it's all about the family.
We're all in this together,
We're in this
right?
together. These are my promises.
And there's better or worse to that, right? There's people who are stuck in abusive situations and mess and all that. But I think we lose the idea that love's not a feeling. It's a decision that you make every day of your life. And if you make that decision every day, in sickness and in health and when things are good, and especially the number of people who will say, I don't care if you don't feel like it, go to the gym. Okay. I don't care if you don't feel like it, empty the dishwasher. I don't care if you don't feel like it. Stop before you go outside, even if you're in a bad mood, and put your wife's face in your hands, or grab your husband by the hand and look him in the eye and say, I love you. How can I love you today? I don't know if you don't feel like it. I don't care if you feel like it, right? And if we begin to treat it like something that we practice, something that we do on a regular basis, you wake up and it's 30 years later and you've had some bad ups and downs. My wife and I have had multiple. I always talk about one, and she joined me on stage for one time, and we were talking to the audience, and she's like, that's happened like 4 or 5 times. Like, oh, I guess we're gonna tell everybody all of it now, right? But it's hard, right? And but you keep saying, okay, I'm back in. We got to build something new. I'm back in. We got to build something new.
How do you know when the hard is normal hard versus abusive hard? Because and I'm bringing up abuse because it's such a topic, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's happening a lot.
Yeah.
But then also, I think sometimes do we classify things as abuse that aren't, or is it just there's so much abuse everywhere?
It's both and. It's both and. So there's the abuse statistics are gnarly. Yeah.
And that's hurting people hurting other people.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have been hurt. And it just perpetuates this vicious cycle, right?
Except
if they experience abuse. Not that you're fated to that.
Yeah. Well, and I have I've got some pretty classic confrontations on my show. Like, I don't care. Don't ever yell at your kids again, ever. Right? Don't yell at your wife again. Stop. Right? I don't care what's happened to you from this point forward. This is over.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so you do have agency. No matter what has happened, you've got agency. You can make a choice. And if you get that angry, leave. If you struggle with anger, and I've sat with people who go blackout rage, then it's your job and nobody else's to do the work upstream so that doesn't happen again. Yeah. Right. And that's your mission. Right. And my mission is I eat my feelings. I have to deal with that on a regular basis. Right. All of us have our stuff that we lean into as a way to numb pain or hurt or historical stuff or whatever. But when it comes to abuse, I think that I always circle back to you got to have people that you sit down and say, hey, I need to tell you all the truth.
About what you're going through.
Yeah. And if you have, this isn't helpful to someone who's found themselves alone.
As the person of being abused.
Like, hey, is this okay?
Is this normal?
Is this right?
Is this normal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this safe?
How do you be a good friend? Like, you know someone, whether they're dating or married, and maybe you're concerned that there's something going on, you know? How do you do that without making the mistake of accidentally being like, are you being abused? And they're like, definitely not. And maybe they're not. And like, you just blew up the friendship a bit, right? Because
so in my world,
that's an accusation right there,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think there's a way to be curious about it versus being judgy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but even the curious
there's
could
a way to
come
say,
across
hey,
as
safe?
offensive to someone. You know?
But I can't
control that.
I can't control how you feel about it. I can control whether I can sleep at night knowing I tried to love you the best I could.
Yeah.
And it's not loving to leave questions unasked, right? But if I'm like,
that's such a good line.
You're being abused. What's that?
Not loving to leave questions unasked.
Yeah. And
that's a really
if you're
good
friends of
point.
mine, you know I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
And my buddies are ruthless. How is your marriage? What have you done this week for your wife? Like, there was a Bible study I went to years ago, and the head of it was in his office. He's an attorney, and we would show up there really early once a week. And every week he would go around the room to the men sitting at the table, what's one thing you did for your wife last week? And there was many a Sunday night that I did something nice so that I have something to say on Monday. Is that great? No. But when I looked up a year later and I had this many things that I'd begun to practice, and now I was looking for ways that I could serve my wife, he won, right?
That's great.
That was a good set of it. And so we often like, that's not the right way to do it. It doesn't matter. Let's get there, right? I don't care what you have to do to stop yelling at your kids. Stop yelling at your kids, right? So if you have people in your life that you're worried that they're being hurt, ask. If you have people in your life,
or there's a dating relationship you're not thrilled about, like they're dating someone, maybe they're not being abused, but you know this is not good for them. Right. Like that's your sense.
Well, a couple of my core personal, as a guy who has hard conversations for a living, the way I do it with my friends is I only speak if I think I can be heard. And I'm not going to sit down and have a lecture conversation with somebody that I don't know that well. I will tell somebody, this doesn't look right and you don't look safe. And the moment you want to talk about it, I'm in your corner. And I'm going to put the ball in your court, but I can't do anything about that. If you're one of my closest friends, I'm going to get messy, and I'm going to risk the friendship for your safety because I love you that much. And
that's it. What you're saying is interesting because I think a lot of us have these loose relationships.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're not really in the position.
No one invited me in. No one asked for my opinion.
Yeah. So how do you love that person?
You listen.
So you make yourself available.
That's right.
And you get curious.
Right. And so it goes back, like, take it back.
But you don't go to the thing. You wait, you give it.
It depends on the severity.
It depends.
If I see somebody with a black eye, or if I see somebody
or if you see someone who's like practically suicidal, you don't be like, oh, I don't know them well enough.
I'll get involved in that 100%, 100 times out of 100. Yeah.
So it all comes back to judgment in the end, like a discernment of, okay, is this an area? Because I think a lot of people, it's tricky for them. Like, when do I know what to say? I mean, I've heard people say, my niece is going trans, right? My niece thinks she's a boy.
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I say to my sister? Do I say something to her? Do I write her a letter? Like, I don't know her super well. She's off at college.
Go to breakfast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we want all these things to be easy. They're not. They're hard and they're messy and they're uncomfortable. And you have to risk saying the wrong thing. You just do, right? And you have to risk saying things like, I have to trust that that you love me enough to know I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm just trying to say I love you, right? And I'll go all the way back with my son. Like, breakfast every Tuesday with an 11-year-old is not super exciting, right? And but you just do it every week, and it's like boring. Hey, Dad, can I ask you something? Right? And I've created a relational foundation, so now it's okay. And we want to just swoop in on these big moments without doing the work on the front end, right? It's like, I want to go buy a house, but I haven't been saving $100 a month for the last 14 years, right? And so you have to do the work in the relationship. If you're an aunt and a kid comes, I mean, as a university administrator, I've had this conversation, I can't count how many times. A student sits down and says, I think this. They came because I'd built a foundation of, like, I'm a safe person you can come ask, and I'll shoot you straight, but I'm gonna shoot you straight because I love you, not because I'm trying to be mean to you. If you're an aunt and suddenly your niece or nephew who you have no relationship with pops up and is struggling with alcohol or struggling with this, you have to establish a relationship or otherwise you're just in the long list of grenade throwers, and just get in line because social media is going to tell them how awful they are. The other political parties.
What if it's the other way around though? What if they're being affirmed in a behavior that you're really concerned about, and you have some rapport, but you're maybe there's some distance, not on purpose, but for whatever reason, they live in a different town, different city.
I'm gonna tell you I love you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you on my show how often I'm like, have you gone over there and talked to him in person? Well, no. How far away are they? 2 hours, 4 hours? Dude, get on a Southwest flight. What have you bought the last 5 months that you couldn't have cobbled together $300 to go sit down with somebody you love and say, I love you, right? And again, it's like, I don't know, I'm nervous, dude, just go. Go be weird.
And if they do get offended, God forbid.
That's a choice they make.
Right.
And by the way, they're 18.
Yeah.
Of course, right? There's a reason they can't buy bullets. Maybe at 18 you can. But you can't buy beer. You're 18, right? We've all, as a society, have been like, your brain's not fully together yet. So as a society, we're all saying you can't do these things yet. But yet we get our feelings hurt when a 20-year-old's mad at us. They're 20. Of course they're supposed to.
Well, I feel like a lot of 30s are the new 20 today.
Fair enough. Yeah. I can't own.
You can't own other people's offense.
I can't. And in this job, especially, it's become real. This morning, somebody just bombed my Instagram account with something.
What does that mean?
They were just sent the most ugly message, just gnarly. And I don't check it very often, and I did I'm sitting in a hotel room this morning by myself. I have no kids, no family, and I'm checking it. And it broke my heart because
like you're such a screwball. How dare you give this ridiculous advice kind of stuff?
No, I think I couldn't even remember, but somewhere I was being sarcastic about, and it was about you're making fun of single people, you're making fun of people without money.
When there's a little bit of truth in there, you're like, yeah, maybe, like I don't know about you, but for me, because I read my comments, I try to read them anyways. I mean, different people, I respect it if you don't, but sometimes it's like, yeah, maybe I could have been a little better there.
I always want to know,
I always
want to know compassion. Well, and unfortunately, like if you have an hour show, sarcasm clipped in a 5-second social media reel or 10-second, doesn't come across. But the heart, like my whole mission in life is to sit with hurting people. And if you took away an interaction with me that looked like I was making fun of hurting people, like, oh, that's the whole thing I'm for, right? And so it still breaks my heart. And I didn't mean that. Yeah. Like that, I never was in any sort of intention. And so I can't own that. And if it's like, I will never listen to anything. I've been with you for 5 years. And if all of that is wiped away because of this one thing, you got other stuff going on. And I love you. And I wish you the absolute best. I hope you find somebody that brings you peace. I can't carry that. Yep. Right. If somebody reaches out and says, dude, I've been listening to your show for 4 years. And then I heard this clip. This did not jive. That's a fair question. And I hope people ask that question. I love that, right? That's a good question to ask. And I would ask my wife that question, ask my son that question, right? Like, your integrity. Tell me about this. This looks like you just stole something. No, Dad, I didn't. Right? I'm gonna give you an opportunity to talk about it. So I think those are all fair. But my daughter looked at me. She's 8, and she is a human hurricane. She's amazing. But I said something about Taylor Swift the other day, and she turned, and it was for dramatic effect. But she's like, oh, "I'm so offended," or "You have offended me." And I told her, I was like, "I don't have that power." And I just want her to know, like, you have body autonomy and you have soul autonomy. You get to decide what hurts your feelings, kid. And
you're like, and I still don't like Taylor Swift. I don't know.
Kind of, but yeah, like, kind of do. She's kind of awesome. But like, but she gets to decide that, right? And the more we realize, oh, that's a choice, it's an option.
That's good, because a lot of people, it's like offense is a sport. Like, how offended can we get over stuff?
And I've given that power to like 4 or 5 people in my life. And that's about it. They can take away my livelihood, or they can frustrate me, make me upset. They can make me angry. Just can't hurt me, because I've given that to my wife and 3 or 4 of other men in my life, and that's it. And I'll accept that. All right.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. For the last thing, for the dating people or the people trying to divorce-proof their marriage, is there anything like questions you recommend you ask, or is there some sort of community vetting system that you recommend you have in place? I mean, I bring that up because, like, one of the things we did before getting married is we did have this like 110 questions that we explored together to really like get deep with each other.
Like premarital counseling?
Yeah,
kinda?
basically. It was called like the focus test, and it went really deep on stuff. Yeah. We were already mostly aligned on stuff, but it unearthed things. And then the community thing is so important. Like, you got to meet the family, you got to meet the friends. Like, who is this person in these other environments? Yes. Right?
Yes. And I think that's important all the way around. And I learned some things about my wife when I brought her home to my oldest friends on the planet. Not great humans, but guys that I trusted. And it was important for her to see all the way around, right?
What would be like a few things you would recommend to close us out here on the dating stuff? Like, what
I think premarital counseling is good.
Okay.
I think having some sort of third party to sit down and ask questions. Like, what do you believe about money? What do you believe about fidelity? What do you believe about, what are your no-goes? Like having those questions and putting them on the table. Who's going to pay the bill, right? Who's actually going to hit send on the electric bill? And it's amazing how both will be like, well, y'all should talk about that, right?
Well, and also, like, do you, like, for women, like, do you expect me to work when we have kids?
Well, but I also think that's a question.
Or do you want me to?
I think that's a question that you can ask, you can answer on the front end, but it's hard.
Well, of course, but like expectation wise, it's good to know.
What's the words I like to use are, what's the picture in your head?
The picture. Because of course life happens to you.
That's right.
You might need to work there. Like life happens to you. Yeah.
And it's a real common thing is somebody will say like, hey, it's a big deal to me if we get married that like, I want my kids to have a stay-at-home mom. Sometimes that's said like my little list I made when I was 18. That's what I think right now, but I have no understanding of what that reality will look like when we have kids or if we have kids. The question I love is, what's your picture of, we have 2 little kids, what's the world look like? And it's like, oh, this and this and this. So one of these, you might go try to live into this expectation that I didn't really have. I said something 7 years ago versus, all right, what's this picture look like now? What's this picture look like this year? And for divorce proofing, my wife and I go every year, we get away and we're pretty honest, pretty brutally honest. Like, here's our financial goals. Like, did we make it? Like, and last year my wife said, you spend too much. She told me that. Like, she's like, you spend too much. And I know it's coming from a place of scarcity. And when you're a kid, like, I know it. But we have these goals. And by the way, these goals you put on the table. And I'm trying to, right? And so I'm not spending here, I'm not spending here. And when you do this, it makes me feel less, right? So you get to you drill down. Those are important conversations to have. And what are some things you're seeing in me, how I'm acting, what kind of dad am I being? And I'm going to be a big boy, I need to hear it. And, or what kind of mom am I being? And let's just be honest with each other. And that takes a year's worth of relational context before you can have those kind of hard conversations. Because if you just start throwing grenades, man, she has to defend herself and I've got to defend myself. And now we're off in a not good place. I think at the end of the day, you have to be willing when you're dating. This is hard. I think you have to be willing to say, with what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling and experiencing, this isn't going to work. And I think most people are so desperate to backfill what they want to happen with data that's going to prove their point, right?
Meaning you got to be willing to walk away.
Yeah.
And some people,
they can't.
They just feel they can't.
I'm 2 years in. They think it's a mutual fund. I've invested this much money into it. I've got to see it through. And you got to be willing to say this was fun. We had a great time. I still care about you. It's just because it hurts doesn't mean it's not the right thing. And sometimes the opposite is true. Here's a good example. I was a hothead, like a loudmouth idiot. And I was always looking for trouble, especially when I was in college and dating. And I thought that made me tough. And I thought that made my wife feel safe. And it didn't. It made her feel unsafe. But when she would say, it's time to go, I'd always go. And years later, when I was like, how did you date me? I was so loud. I was so like, always like, I was just such an idiot. And she said, because it wasn't the first thing, it was always the second thing. And when I would say, I think this is not a safe place for me, I'd like you to, you always defaulted to my safety over your ego. And she goes, that meant you were safe. That was safe for me. You would be willing to put your ego aside and walk out the door with me and make sure I got home safe. And that was beneath her West Texas, like, get him, John. Right. Beneath that was, no, your default will be to keep me safe.
But she had to ask for it.
She had to ask for it.
But she was okay asking for it.
It wasn't a fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but if I asked him to go, he would leave.
Yeah.
Have you ever asked?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or if he asks.
But back to the game theory stuff, like she had a boundary and she was willing to be open about her boundary. Yeah. And you met her where she was at with her boundary and you guys built this beautiful life together. But if she had never asked, you'd be like, oh, I'm so unsafe with him. And you're like, and they're like, okay, this relationship is clearly not working. Maybe it would have worked.
But one of her anchors was, one of her values was, I deserve to be safe.
That's good.
And her brother and her dad taught her that.
And that she's willing to ask for it.
And her church, so some guy was not going to, it was going to fit into that value. With when I'm with you,
because I think so many women
feel safe.
And men we're afraid to ask.
That's right.
We're kind of afraid to, create a boundary, yes, but it's one thing to create a boundary and just be like, okay, I'm out. Like, oh, I don't like this behavior, so I'm out. Or I don't like this detail, so I'm out. Instead of like, well, let's engage the detail. Is this a non-negotiable for you? You love this way of lifestyle, but it really rubs on me the wrong way. Can we work through this, right? Like go and see, can we work together on this?
Or I'm a 19-year-old loudmouth idiot. And so if I believe that the way to show her that she's safe is to try to fight everybody and she likes me, it's a gift to me if she has that one conversation that says, hey, that doesn't make me feel safe. What makes me feel safe is if I asked you to leave, that we leave. Give me a chance, right? Give me a chance. But that means she has to have enough confidence to speak her needs out loud.
That's why, like they say, some of the best advice I've received, I'm going to botch the way this was said, but basically is two people can make it work. Any two people can make it work if they're willing to try towards the same direction.
Yeah. Like, and
like you can do,
there's some outliers there, but
there's outliers. I mean, obviously, like there's some prohibitive behavior of that. It's like, don't try to make it work if the person's in this horrible space, or whatever. Right. But ultimately, like two generally oriented the right direction people can make it work if they want to, and if they try. You gotta want to, you gotta try.
The two questions that changed my marriage transformed it. What's your picture of this look like? And how can I love you today? The picture one, we may have talked about this before, but hey, we're going to see my parents. We're going to drive 3 hours to visit my parents. My picture of that trip is I'm going to get there. I'm going to get the car unloaded, and then I'm going fishing. I cause more problems around all this than I help. I'm going to go fishing. Her picture is we're all going to sit around the fire and we're all going to tell stories. I'm trying to help. She's trying to help, and we end up on the other side and then she's mad, and I can feel her mad, and I'm mad that she's mad. And all of it was, hey, what's your picture of this trip to your parents' house? Like, hey, I just want you to stay inside and just be with us. Got it. I can sing and dance for a couple hours. I can do that.
Good.
And hey, what's your picture for this? I'm going to drop off for them. I'm going fishing. Okay, I can make that. I can make that work. But it's us. We're both saying visit mom and dad's. We're using the same words, but what's the picture? Yeah. What's the picture for tonight's date? What's the picture for? My wife gave me a list of questions to not ask when our daughter was born, because I was asking all kind of questions when she was in labor with our son, and so she gave me the playlist for the hospital and don't ask, am I hurting? Don't ask, am I doing okay? Don't ask, like, all these questions. She's like, they're not helpful. They're more annoying, right? I know you love me. I know you just be there and look, right? And so those kind of things were super helpful, right? But that was aligning. Here's the picture I have in my head for this, how this is going to go.
So good.
And I get to live into that.
Do you have a little one in your life, a new niece or nephew, a baby yourself, or a dear friend who just had a baby? You should get them a subscription or an order of everylife.com diapers. These diapers are best in class. They're leak-proof. They're made with great quality materials that are good for your little one's skin. And best of all, everylife.com is a pro-life company. So this is America's fastest growing and its only pro-life diaper company. At everylife.com, you can find diapers, wipes, and in the future, other baby products, and you can become a subscriber using the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. So check out everylife.com today, support America's fastest growing diaper company and pro-life diaper company, and use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. Thanks, John. Such good stuff.
You're awesome. Thanks for hanging out.
Where can people find your stuff?
Everywhere on the internet, yeah.
Dr. John Delony online.
The Dr. John Delony Show, and then at John Delony on the internet.
And you've got a book out.
Yes.
You always have a book out, right?
I'm taking a break from
nice.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. There's too many books in too many years.
What's the latest book?
Building an Anxious Life. Yeah.
I think
About
I have
anxiety.
that one. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for your hospitality.
So
you have a great team.
Thank you. I know we do. We really are blessed. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Lila Rose podcast. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. And we have a locals community. We just did our first behind the paywall live stream just for people on locals who are subscribed. So go check it out today. We'll see you next time.